Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a truly terrifying yet kind of forgotten criminal case in modern history. We're heading back to 1970s India, which was a deeply vulnerable time for the nation, to track a literal phantom who cast a massive, terrifying shadow across multiple states. Okay, let's dive into this.
Picture this. It's the holy city of Sri Ganganagar, Rajasthan, September 9th, 1973. It's early, right around 7 a.m., and a man named Shyam Singh arrives at the local Gurudwara. He's just expecting to light some incense, do his daily cleaning, the usual routine. But the doors are completely shut, and it is dead silent. When he finally pushes that heavy door open, he's met with an absolute nightmare. He saw 3 caretakers lying in a pool of blood on their cots. It literally looked as if a storm had just ripped through the place. Locks were shattered, belongings were just thrown everywhere. One caretaker was already gone. Another would tragically succumb on the way to the hospital. This incredibly sacred, peaceful place had literally been turned into a house of horrors overnight.
72. I just want you to let that number sink in for a second. Because when the police actually started digging into the Gurudwara attack, they realized this wasn't just some isolated robbery gone wrong. They were looking at the horrifying signature of a prolific serial killer. Law enforcement had actually seen this exact brutal method before, scattered all across Rajasthan, Haryana, and Punjab. Ultimately, this one individual would confess to taking at least 72 lives.
Section 1. The Making of a Criminal. Let's look at how this all started.
To understand how someone even becomes capable of that scale of violence, we have to wind the clock way back to 1952 in Jaipur. Born into a totally normal middle-class family, we have a boy named Shankar Prajapati. Initially, his birth was celebrated as a blessing. His parents had all these high hopes for him, especially for his education. But Shankar was just different. As he grew up, he showed absolutely zero interest in studying. And his parents' reaction? They didn't just get disappointed, they completely withdrew all their support. They totally cut him off, financially and emotionally, and basically told him to survive on his own. So, with zero money for basic needs, a very young Shankar resorted to petty theft. We're talking stealing from neighbors, swiping coins from temple donation boxes, even breaking into houses just to grab some chapati so he wouldn't starve. And time after time, he was caught, and he was physically beaten by the locals.
And this brilliantly illustrates what criminologists call the labeling theory of crime. Basically, society, and in this case his very own family, branded Shankar as an absolute, irredeemable failure, a criminal. And psychology tells us that when you strip away someone's entire support system and just slap this inescapable negative identity on them, they are highly, highly likely to fulfill that exact prophecy. His relationship with his parents completely shattered, and eventually Shankar just left home for good.
Which brings us to Section 2, A Reign of Terror.
So fast forward to the early 1970s. Those petty thefts, those desperate burglaries for food, they started escalating into something so much worse. And we really need to look at the historical context here to understand how. In 1971, tensions between India and Pakistan were at an absolute boiling point. They were threatening to erupt into an all-out war at any second. So, naturally, the entire nation's focus, including a massive chunk of police resources, was totally locked on the border. This intense national distraction created the absolute perfect blind spot. The killer completely capitalized on this vulnerability, slipping quietly across the regions of Rajasthan, Haryana, and Punjab without ever drawing any coordinated attention from law enforcement. Because nobody actually knew his real name, the terrified locals ended up giving him a nickname based on his horrifying signature move. They called him Kanpatti Mar, which basically translates to the one who strikes beneath the ears. And that's because every single one of his victims was struck mercilessly in that exact fatal spot with some sort of heavy weapon.
You can probably guess the effect this had. The whole region was gripped by this absolute paralyzing paranoia. People were literally whispering that this wasn't even a human being, but some sort of ghost. But the very few people who miraculously survived these attacks,
They gave a chillingly consistent description: a thin man wrapped tightly in a blanket who would just emerge out of the dead of night. The fear was so palpable that the second the sun went down, the streets just completely emptied out. Entire families would literally cram themselves into one single locked room, sweating through the intense summer heat, absolutely terrified that Kanpatti Mar would be standing over their beds next.
Section 3. Tracking the Killer. Let's move to and see how this builds.
That horrific attack at the Shaldol City Gurudwara we talked about earlier, that was the breaking point. It sparked massive public outrage and finally put Superintendent of Police Shyam Pratap Singh directly in charge of the manhunt. When SP Singh walked into that crime scene, the tragic senselessness of it all was just staring him in the face. 2 innocent, deeply devoted caretakers murdered. A third horribly traumatized. And what did the killer actually walk away with in exchange for destroying those lives? A mere 19 rupees. Just 19 rupees. It highlighted this absolute, appalling lack of value for human life.
So, looking at the scene, it's a total mess of forced entry signs and scattered belongings. But crucially, SB Singh's team managed to find bloody footprints and some fingerprints left on a scattered tin box. They bagged this evidence and sent it straight off to the Jaipur Fingerprint Bureau. Now, this is actually super fascinating because using real forensic evidence was incredibly rare in 1970s India. But because the country's forensic infrastructure was still pretty much in its infancy, they didn't get an immediate match. That meant the police had to completely pivot and rely heavily on good old-fashioned, boots-on-the-ground detective work.
And honestly, SP Singh's methodical detective work here was nothing short of brilliant. Step 1. He tracked down a witness near the railway tracks who had spotted a suspicious outsider buying a ticket from Shahdool to Bathinda, Punjab, which happened to be a city seeing a massive spike in these exact types of murders. Step 2. Singh rounded up all the known survivors of Kanpatti Mar, but he put them in totally separate, isolated rooms so they couldn't influence each other's memories. Then, he brought in different sketch artists for each of them. Step 3. He cross-referenced every single resulting sketch, and astoundingly, they all matched perfectly. He finally had a face.
So they take that sketch and plastered it across 3 entire states. It took months of absolutely exhausting needle in a haystack searching, but the breakthrough finally happened. On July 3rd, 1974, right at the Bathinda railway station, police apprehended a local rickshaw driver named Ratan Lal, and he was a dead ringer for the sketch.
Section 4. The Chilling Confession.
It turns out, Ratan Lal, the simple rickshaw driver, was a complete disguise. Because when authorities dragged him back to Sri Karanpur for questioning, the locals there recognized him instantly. It was their old neighbor, Shankar. The same little boy who used to steal chapatis just to survive had come back as an absolute monster. And during his interrogation, his arrogance was just bone-chilling. He actually left. He demanded they untie his hands before he'd even bothered telling them who he killed. He freely confessed to over 72 murders, casually throwing in that a lot of them were never even reported to the police. He didn't use some specialized murder weapon either. He just grabbed whatever heavy object happened to be lying around. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is he didn't just kill for money. I mean, we saw the 19 rupees at the Gurudwara. He confessed that taking a life had become this profound, sick addiction for him. He actually told the police he loved hearing his victims scream. He said it sounded like a song to him. The murders were totally random, driven by nothing but a sadistic compulsion.
And if you want to add another layer to this deeply twisted psychology, his appointed lawyer, advocate Manoram Jope, later revealed a totally bizarre ritual that Shankar practiced. After committing these atrocious, entirely random murders, Shankar would literally travel to Haridwar just to bathe in the holy waters of the river Ganges. In his totally distorted mind, he genuinely believed this little ritual would literally wash away the immense sins he had just committed, like he was completely resetting his conscience before going out and brutally attacking someone else.
Section 5. India's Speediest Trial. Let's see how the justice system handled this.
Obviously, a confessed reign of terror on this scale demanded extremely swift justice, and the Indian legal system, which, let's be honest, is often criticized for dragging on for years or even decades, moved with absolute, unprecedented urgency here. Look at this timeline. Arrested in the summer of 1974, by June 1975, he's handed a death sentence by the Sessions Court. Shankar desperately tried to fight it, of course. He appealed to the High Court, then the Supreme Court. He even went as far as writing a personal letter to the President of India. But every single appeal was firmly denied. On May 16, 1976, less than 2 years after they slapped the cuffs on him, Kanpatti Mar was executed in Jaipur.
But right before his execution, the man who had single-handedly terrorized 3 entire states and slaughtered at least 72 people left us with these final, chilling words. "I have killed many people without reason. Now don't become like me." It's just this incredibly strange, fleeting moment of regret right at the very end of a dark, psychotic journey. A journey that was forged by early rejection and just completely consumed by an uncontrollable addiction to violence.
So the crucial point is, we know Shankar exploited a very specific time of national distraction, right? And he took advantage of a totally underdeveloped forensic infrastructure. But it really forces us to ask, with all our modern, ultra-connected databases and cutting-edge forensics today, could a serial killer still slip through the cracks of our system? Could someone still cross state lines and prey on the most vulnerable in the dead of night without getting caught? It's definitely a terrifying thought to leave you with, but one that absolutely challenges us to make sure our justice system never, ever allows another shadow like Kanpatti Mar to fall over us again. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.
Yeah.